Hello and welcome to Global Summit of Technology Facilitated Gender-Based Violence. This session is When AI Harms and Helps, South Korea and Deepfake Abuse. I am Seong-Shin Lunabe, Senior Legal and Policy Advisor and Supreme Prosecutor Office of South Korea, and also PhD candidate in Monash University, working on everyday digital infrastructure and intimate partner violence and coercive control. I'm very pleased to be moderating today. So before we begin, a brief contents note. Today's discussion deal with the sexual violence, image-based abuse, and technology facilitated harm. So some of the contents may be distressing. So please take care of yourself as you watch. And if you'd like to reach out for support, you can find the link in the chat to the No More Global Directory of Specialist Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence Services. So today's conversation asks a difficult but increasingly urgent question. So what happened when artificial intelligence became tool of abuse and both also the tool of response? We'll be looking closely at South Korea, where deepfake sexual abuse has really become a major social, legal, and police concern. But the question we really raise here are quite global. How do we understand the harm? Who should be held accountable? And how can technology be used responsibly? And what does the survivor center response actually look like in practice? So let me share two numbers before we begin. So according to 2023 global report by Security Hero, 53% of all individuals appearing in deepfake pornography worldwide were South Korean. A country tech make up the less than 1% of the world's population. And also in 2024, when Korean police uncovered a single Telegram chat room dedicated to this kind of abuse, it has more than 200,000 members. So many of the perpetrators and many of survivors were teenagers, sadly, sometimes from the same school. So this is not a future risk we're really facing at the moment. It is already here in South Korea and globally as well. So I'm definitely delighted to be joined by two amazing speakers who bring different but deeply connected perspectives. So first, we have the Professor Han of the Korean National Police University, whose research examined the deepfake sexual images, law, gender-based violence, and sexual personality rights. And also we have Dr. Kim, policy lead at Seoul Metropolitan Government's Gender Equality Division, who has been closely involved in Seoul's police response to digital sex crimes, including survivor support and AI assists removal system. In 2024, Seoul's police was selected by United Nations Public Service Awards. It was amazing, the outcome. So thank you both so much for joining us today. I was starting with the big question in a way. So Professor Han, your research on deepfake abuse is still quite relatively new, but South Korea has already seen serious and highly visible harms. What does evidence tell us so far about the scale and impact of this abuse in South Korea?
South Korea has one of the most advanced ICT infrastructures in the world, and partly because of that, deepfake sexual imagery emerged here more rapidly and in a more severe form than in other countries. It has been nearly 5 years since the legislation was introduced to criminalize it. The primary survivors are young women and girls in their teens and 20s. But what makes the Korean situation distinctive is the relationship between perpetrator and victim survivor. A significant proportion of survivors are K-pop idols or well-known female celebrities, people the perpetrators have never met. When the survivor is not a public figure, the perpetrator is often a mere acquaintance, a coworker, a classmate at the same school. And the survivor often has a specific occupational identity. A high school student in uniform, a school teacher, a soldier, a flight attendant, or a nurse. Another striking feature is that production and distribution in South Korea is largely profit-driven. Perpetrators commission deepfake content from strangers via social media, then hire yet another stranger to handle distribution. Even when there is a single survivor, the chain is culpability is wide. Separate people commissioning, producing, distributing, and viewing, purchasing the content. These actors communicate only online, and every stage is monetized through cryptocurrency, gift card pins, or direct bank transfers. That's why current research and policy debate in Korea is increasingly focused on the criminal revenue structure and on strategies for asset recovery.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Han. Yeah, that is really helpful, especially you pointing that this is not only about individual misuse of technology, but about like networks of production, distribution, and consumption as well. So, Dr. Kim, Seoul has been at the forefront of the policy responses to digital sex crimes. Could you work us through the integrated policy model you developed and what made it effective in practice?
Yeah, so the Seoul metropolitan government recognized digital sex crime as a form of gender-based violence and concluded that a comprehensive response was needed from prevention all the way through the survivor support. We moved away from blaming survivors with comments like, she shouldn't have taken those photos, and instead made it clear that responsibility lies with the operators who create and distribute the contents and with the criminal structures that profit from it. From that gender-based perspective, we built an integrated policy framework with four stages. First, prevention through education and public awareness campaigns. An early intervention system that allows for rapid reporting and response. Third, comprehensive support for survivors, from counseling to recovery and reintegration into daily life. And fourth, work to prevent reoffending through counseling and intervention programs for perpetrators. This model has been effective because it treats digital sex crimes not as isolated incidents, but as structural social problems. By connecting preventions, early intervention, survivor support, and the offense preventions, we have tried to build a broad social safety, one that addresses both immediate response and long-term prevention.
Thank you. Yeah, what stands out there is the Seoul's model does not treat the digital sex crime is one of incidents. It's really connecting preventions, early intervention, and survivor support and reoffending prevention as well. So, Professor Han, your work argues that deepfake sexually imagery should be understood not only as a privacy violation or an issue of non-consensual image sharing, but as a violation of what you call sexual personality rights. So, for a global audience who may not be familiar with this concept, could you explain what is at stake in that framing and why it matters for responding to deepfake abuse?
As I mentioned earlier, the defining feature of the South Korean situation is the lack of a prior relationship between perpetrators and victim survivors. In our policy recorded data, intimate or former partners account for only about 10% of cases. This means that the mainstream Western framework of intimate image abuse or intimate partner violence is not enough to explain what is happening in South Korea. It is still matters where it applies, but the broader structural reality lies elsewhere. My argument that deepfake sexual imagery should be understood as an infringement of sexual personality rights comes from this context. Historically, gender-based violence in South Korea has been framed as a violence of the right to sexual self-determination. That is a right to make choices about one's own sexual behavior, free from coercion, and to refuse unwanted sexual contact. But in deepfake sexual imagery, the survivor is not a position of deciding upon a sexual action at all. They are simply trying to preserve their fundamental dignity. When the image is manufactured and distributed by people the survivor has never met, when neither party even knows the other's identity, what is being attacked is the survivor's human dignity and personhood through a sexualized medium. In a situation where the survivor was never given the possibility to exercise self-determination in the first place, we need to be clearer about what is actually being violated. That is why I propose that deepfake sexual imagery should be defined not as a violation of the right to sexual self-determination, but as a direct infringement of sexual personality rights.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a distinction is really important because of the shift, the focus away from the whether the image is real or fake, and toward the deeper harm to dignity, personhoods, and sexual integrity, as you said. Okay, so Dr. Kim, so deepfake abuse often involves many actors, such as the person who created or recast the image, or the platform that hosts and circulated, and AI tools, and sometimes overseas servers as well. So, from the police perspective, so where should accountability lie with the perpetrators, platform, the states, or all of these actors?
Yes, I don't believe responsibility lies with only one actor. Perpetrators must, of course, bear direct responsibility for their actions, but platforms and governments also carry major responsibilities. The fake-based sexual abuse spreads rapidly through platform, recommendation algorithms, and systems built around anonymity. Because of this, it's difficult to see platforms as merely neutral technology providers. In many cases, even after survivors report the harmful content, removal is delayed or re-uploads are not effectively prevented, and the harm keeps spreading. Governments too need to move beyond simply punishing offenders after the they have to play a more active role in strengthening legal frameworks, uh, promoting international cooperation, regulating platforms, and building survivor support systems. At this point, current frameworks are not sufficient. Technology is evolving much faster than laws and international cooperation systems. Going forward, we need stronger platform safety obligations, more effective system to prevent repeat loss, and clearer international standards. Most importantly, we must recognize a basic principle. Human dignity and safety must come before technology innovations.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. That's really bring us to the question of shared responsibility. It is not enough to focus only one individual perpetrator. If the wider digital environments allow the harm to spread and remain accessible, right? So I'd like to ask both of you about the survivor center responses. So But from your different perspectives, Professor Han, from your research, what are the specific harm that deepfake survivor experience, especially around the lose of control, reputation, and everyday life?
Unlike some forms of image-based sexual abuse, a significant number of deepfake survivors in South Korea are public figures, K-pop idols, and other well-known female celebrities. Because their identities are already publicly known, the harm is not centered on the fear of being newly identified or exposed. The trauma often comes from a different source, the experience of being sexualized entirely without their knowledge or consent, and the uncertainty of not knowing who targeted them, why, or how widely the image has circulated. For non-public figures, the harm is equally serious. Victim survivors experience a profound loss of control over their own image, reputation, and everyday life. Some change their phone numbers, addresses, or social media accounts. Others withdraw from online spaces altogether. These are not minor adjustments. They are attempts to regain control after a serious violation of dignity and social identity. I would I would also be cautious about treating deepfake abuse as less serious simply because the image is synthetic. The image may be fake, but the harm is real. It affects how survivors understand themselves, how they believe others see them, and how safe they feel in both online and offline spaces. So a victim-centered response cannot be reduced to removal. Survivors also need the psychological support, reputational protection, and the practical assistance, and systems that do not force them to repeatedly prove or explain the harm. The central question is not really whether an image is technically real or fake. The deeper question is how sexualized digital manipulation affects a person's dignity, safety, and ability to return to everyday life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So you has just shifted our question from the is this image real or fake to whose dignity does our system protect, right? So, Dr. Kim, that is exactly the question Seoul has had to answer in practice. So, from your policy experience, what does survivor center support looks like on the ground? Before you answer, I want to note for our audience what comes next include data about the severity of harm survivor experience. So please take care as you listen.
Yes, digital sex crimes, including deepfake abuse, are often described as a form of character assassination. And I want our audience to understand what that really means. In Korea, one out of every two survivors of digital sex crimes has attempted suicide. The figure is not a statistic about vulnerability. It is a statistic about how completely this kind of abuse can dismantle a person's life, their sense of safety, their relationships, their ability to be seen in public without fear. Many survivors become afraid to leave their homes because they fear someone may recognize them. And some find it difficult to continue their educations, career, or daily social lives. That is why one of the most important forms of support is helping survivors understand this is your fault. We need integrated support grounded in a gender-based understanding of violence. In many cases, survivors are forced to visit multiple institutions, counseling centers, law firms, police stations, and repeatedly explain their experience. During that process, many experience secondary trauma. To address this, so we create a one-stop support system. With a single phone call, survivors can access counseling, legal assistance, psychological care, and content removal support, all free of charge and connected through one system. Each survivor is also paired with a dedicated support companion who provides one-on-one assistance throughout the entire process. One of the biggest remaining gaps is that we still do not provide enough support for survivors after the initial recovery stage. I believe support should continue until survivors are truly able to feel what happened to me was not my fault and fully reclaim their daily lives.
Yeah, thank you. What I hear from you, your answer, Dr. Kim, is that the survivor-centered response is not just removing contents, right? It is also about reducing secondary trauma, restoring control, and supporting people to return to daily their own life, actually. So and I also recognize one of the distinctive part of Seoul's response is the use of AI-based tool to support the detection and removal of abusive imagery. So, could you explain in accessible term how it works and what it has achieved and what limitation remains?
Yes, the biggest reason so developed an AI-based removal support system was that manual methods alone could no longer keep up with the speed at which harmful content spread. Abusive videos can spread almost instantly across online platforms, Telegram channels, and other digital spaces. In the past, survivors and counselors had to manually search online platforms to locate harmful contents. Survivors were repeatedly exposed to their own abusive images and videos, and counselors spent entire days reviewing similar contents and submitting removal requests. This caused a significant trauma not only for survivors, but for support staff as well. To address this, so introduce an AI-based removal support system. The system uses integrated analysis of video, audio, and text to detect highly similar abusive content 24 hours a day and automatically submit the removal request. The most significant achievement has been a dramatic improvements in both response speed and accuracy. In the past, it could take up to 3 hours to identify harmful contents and request its removal. Now, AI can locate the content and initiate the removal request in as little as 5 minutes. As a result, survivors experiencing severe anxiety because of the spread of abusive contents has been able to regain greater psychological stability and receive more meaningful support in their recovery. Of course, limitations remain. New editing and evasion techniques continue to emerge, and the actual speed of removal can vary depending on cooperation from overseas platforms. But one thing is clear. Without AI, it would be extremely difficult to respond effectively to digital sex crimes at their current state. What matters most is not the technology itself, but how the technology is used to protect survivors' recovery, dignity, and human rights.
Yes, we really can imagine the like technology, the speed to the developing the technology, right? So I think it's Dr. Kim has just shown us the version of AI that clearly helped the survivors. So Professor Han, you have looked at the same technology with the rather more caution. Where do you see genuine potential for AI to strengthen the responses? For example, in investigation, prosecution, education, or the survivor support? And are there any ethical risk we need to be careful about?
In South Korea, survivor support for both non-consensual filming and deepfake sexual imagery still relies heavily on manual work. Operators locating individual URLs to block further dissemination, but perpetrators deliberately exploit the gaps in this system. The vast majority of this content is distributed through global platforms or hosted on overseas servers well beyond the South Korean legal jurisdiction. Using AI to detect and remove this material would be ideal, and preventing its creation in the first place would be even better. But I am skeptical about the practical efficacy of specialized remover AIs on their own. AI detection technologies cannot enforce compliance in jurisdictions where Korean law has no authority. At the investigative and prosecutorial stage, distinguishing authentic footage from synthetic generation does have a practical use because Korean law penalizes them under separated status. But from a conceptual standpoint, the harm of sexual imagery is deeply embodied. Obsessing over a binary question, is this AI generated or not, holds a little substance for the survivor. And I want to raise a critical concern about research ethics. The development of deepfake detection tools often involves aggregating and training algorithms on huge volumes of evidentiary footage submitted by victim survivors, frequently without their informed or explicit consent for use in machine learning. That is a serious problem. If there is a real potential for AI in this field, I believe it lies in survivor support services. Many survivors in South Korea describe the same first moment. They found out from a friend or from a stranger's message that an image of them is circulating. And in that moment, they have no idea what to do, who to call, or whether anyone will believe them. An AI-driven chatbot available at any hour could meet a survivor at exactly that moment, guiding them on where to seek help, how to navigate the criminal justice system, and what government resources are available. AI could also be used to develop interactive educational content, helping bystanders and support networks understand their role and take meaningful action to stand with survivors.
Yes, yes. I think as initial contact as first action is really important for a survivor, actually. And also, that is the important reminder as well that using AI in this field is not automatically ethical simply because the goal is protection, right? So question of consent, evidence, survivor data, and institutionally accountability still really matter. I'd like to bring this back to our global audience. South Korea has moved at the quickly in law and policy, but the problem has also continued to evolve. So this matters especially for prevention because young women and girls are disproportionately targeted at the moment, and some young offenders that still treat deepfake abuse as just joke for fun, for any as entertainments as well. So based on Korean experience, what is one lesson for our audience, other countries that should take seriously, whether in law, education, platform design, or survivor support? And one thing they should avoid. Professor Han, please share your idea first.
South Korea has acted relatively swiftly through legislation. Convicted perpetrators are subject to national registration and management of their personal information for a minimum 10 years. The same measure applied to other severe forms of sexual violence. And yet, despite this rigorous framework, technology facilitated gender-based violence and deepfake sexual imagery have continued to proliferate with an upward trend each year. I would argue that the failure to curb it stems from two critical oversights: the breakdown of international investigative cooperation and the neglect of the underlying criminal revenue structure. Because deepfakes are largely distributed on global platforms where hosted overseas, unilateral domestic interventions face severe limits. It is virtually impossible to eradicate made in Korea deepfake imagery while foreign other websites operate with impunity. We need destination countries with legal jurisdiction to recognize that this is not consensually produced pornography. It is a severe violation causing profound harm, and that requires a robust international investigative cooperation. We have to reframe deepfake sexual imagery as a transnational crime, not an isolated national issue. And for perpetrators, deepfake imagery serves a dual purpose: a form of misogynistic entertainment rooted in male peer support and a lucrative source of revenue. Offenders gain status and pleasure with their peer groups and at the same time generate profit. Dismantling that financial architecture through asset recovery is essential to deserving the wider ecosystem of creation, distribution, and consumption. But this too is entangled with international challenges. Many key perpetrators hold permanent residence abroad. The servers are overseas, and the illicit proceeds remain out of reach, leaving Korean victim survivors unable to claim restitution.
Yes, it sounds like global cooperation is quite important for the mitigating the deepfake abuse. So, Dr. Kim, any your perspective? Do you want to add something?
Yes, Korea has responded relatively quickly in developing legislation and policy once digital sex crimes became a major social issue. One particularly meaningful shift was recognizing digital sex crimes not as individual problems, but as a form of gender-based violence. Since 2019, Seoul has built an integrated response systems. At the time, most responses focused mainly on post-incident survivor support, but Seoul came to see digital sex crimes as structural issues, requiring intervention across the entire process. One important question for other countries is this. Responses should not focus only one content remover or foster incident support. Digital sex crimes cannot be solved only after the harm has already occurred. We need integrated systems that connect prevention, education, early intervention, survivor support, and long-term prevention of repeat offenses.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to ask the final question, the both of you. If you could to change one thing in law, technology, police, or society to better protect the people from the AI facilitated abuse, what would be here, or maybe 1 minute each, so we can close with the clear message for our global audience. So, Professor Han?
If I could change one thing, I would change how responsibility is distributed. At the moment, the burden of AI facilitated sexual abuse falls mainly on survivors. They are the ones who discover the image, report it, seek removal, navigate the criminal justice system, and manage the reputational and psychological consequences. But the platforms that host and circulate the content, the developers who release tools with foreseeable risks, and the peer communities that normalize this abuse often bear far less responsibility. So I would shift the responsibility away from survivors and towards the institutions and actors that make this abuse possible, profitable, and scalable. If that shift happened, then legal reform, platform safety, education, and technical safeguards would all become much more meaningful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What about Dr. Kim?
Yes, I agree. I would choose to change society. Technology and laws are both critically important, but in the end, it is society's values that determine what kind of technology we build and what kind of laws we demand. If society continues to tolerate the consumption and accumulation of other people's images, bodies, and dignity, then new technologies will continue to be used for new forms of violence. But if we build a society that values human dignity, consent, and accountability, even in digital spaces, then technology can also develop in safer and more ethical directions. In in the age of AI, I believe the most important question is not what is possible. The more important question is what kind of society do we want to build? And at the center of the questions must always be the dignity of survivors.
Yeah, that's really insightful discussion. Thank you. Thank you both. So I think today's conversation really has highlighted the double-edged role of AI in technology facilitated gender-based violence. So AI can be definitely weaponized to create profound sexual, reputational, and psychological harm. But also, as we have also heard that the technology can be used to support the faster responses, reduce the burden on survivors and frontline workers, and inform more effective policy as well. So I think the key lesson is that technology itself never enough, right? What matters is the legal, social, and ethical framework around it, who is protected, who is made responsible, and whose dignity is placed at the center. Okay, to wrap up, on behalf of No More Global Summit, I would like to thank Professor Han and Dr. Kim for sharing your expertise, and thanks everyone watching for joining this amazing, important conversations. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.